Officer Marcus Williams thought it was just another search mission in the dense Pine Ridge Forest outside Portland, Oregon. His K-9 partner Duke, a 4-year-old German Shepherd with 47 successful rescues under his collar, had found dozens of missing people before. But when Duke located 3-year-old Emma Sullivan after 14 terrifying hours in the freezing wilderness, what the police dog did next left every officer, paramedic, and FBI agent completely speechless. Because Duke wasn't just finding a lost child that October morning. He was about to uncover something that would shake the entire Pacific Northwest and change police K-9 protocols across the nation forever. But before I reveal what Duke discovered that made even hardened FBI agents question everything they thought they knew about police dogs, I need to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your state in the comments below, especially if you're from Oregon or Washington, because this story happened closer to home than you might think. And if you believe that true stories of unbelievable courage deserve to be heard, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell right now. Give this video a like if you've ever witnessed the incredible bond between humans and dogs. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll never look at police dogs the same way again. The autumn fog that morning was so thick that Marcus could barely see 10 feet ahead of him. It rolled through the towering Douglas firs like a living thing, muffling sounds and distorting distances. The temperature had dropped to 38 degrees overnight, and every breath Duke took formed small clouds in the frigid air. Cedar Creek rushed somewhere nearby, its constant gurgling making it nearly impossible to hear any human sounds. The Sullivan family cabin sat empty 2 miles behind them, little Emma's pink teddy bear still lying on the wooden porch where she dropped it the previous afternoon at 4:47 p.m., according to her frantic mother Michelle's timeline. Duke moved methodically through the underbrush, his nose working constantly, processing thousands of scents that Marcus could never hope to detect. This wasn't just any police dog. Duke had been with the Portland Police Bureau for 3 years, and in that time, he'd become something of a legend. 47 successful rescues, 3 commendations for bravery, and a perfect record in court testimonies. But Marcus knew something about Duke that most people didn't. The dog had been found as a 6-week-old puppy, abandoned in a dumpster behind a grocery store in Gresham, nearly dead from starvation and exposure. Maybe that's why Duke never gave up on lost souls. Maybe that's why he pushed harder than any other K-9 unit when a child was involved. Marcus gripped the leather leash tighter as they moved deeper into the forest. The search and rescue team had been at it since 3 a.m., and now, as 9 a.m. approached, the statistics were becoming grim. A 3-year-old child, alone in these woods, with temperatures dropping below 40 degrees, wearing only a light jacket and canvas shoes. Every hour that passed decreased the chances of a positive outcome. Sarah Martinez, the search coordinator, had already quietly pulled Marcus aside to discuss the possibility of calling in cadaver dogs by noon. Then Duke froze. It happened so suddenly that Marcus nearly stumbled. Duke's entire body went rigid, his tail straight out behind him, his ears pitched forward at maximum attention. In their 3 years working together, Marcus had seen this exact behavior 23 times. Every single time, it meant Duke had found something significant. The dog's breathing changed, becoming shallow and rapid. Then, without warning, Duke pulled forward with such force that Marcus had to jog to keep up. They crashed through a cluster of blackberry bushes, the thorns catching on Marcus's uniform, and emerged near a pile of fallen logs close to where Cedar Creek made a sharp bend. Duke was already circling a specific spot, his whines growing more urgent with each second. There, beneath a makeshift shelter of branches that someone had clearly arranged by hand, was Emma Sullivan. Her pink jacket was torn in 3 places and covered in mud. Her blonde hair was matted with leaves and debris. But she was breathing. She was alive. Marcus immediately hit his radio. "Base, this is K-9 Unit 7. We have her. We found Emma Sullivan. GPS coordinates coming through now. We need medical immediately. The child is conscious, but appears to be in mild hypothermia." The relief in Sarah Martinez's voice crackled through the radio. "Copy that, Unit 7. Medical en route to your position. Outstanding work." Within 4 minutes, the area was swarming with rescue personnel. Paramedic Jennifer Torres was the first to reach them, her medical kit already open as she knelt beside Emma. The little girl's eyes were open but unfocused, her skin pale with a bluish tint around her lips. Jennifer worked quickly, wrapping Emma in thermal blankets and checking her vitals. "Pulse is steady," she announced. "Core temperature is low but not critical. We need to move her now." That's when everything changed. As Jennifer lifted Emma to carry her to the waiting ambulance, Duke did something that shocked everyone present. Something that in 13 years of canine handling, Marcus had never seen before. Duke lunged forward and grabbed Jennifer's sleeve with his teeth. Not aggressively, not violently, but with an insistence that made everyone stop. The dog was whimpering, a high-pitched, desperate sound that seemed almost human in its urgency. "Duke, release," Marcus commanded, embarrassment coloring his cheeks. His perfectly trained partner had never, not once, disobeyed a direct command. "Duke, heel." But Duke didn't release. Instead, he pulled harder, trying to drag Jennifer back toward the forest. Then, just as suddenly as he grabbed her, he let go and ran back to where they'd found Emma. He began digging frantically at a pile of leaves near the fallen logs, his movements desperate, almost panicked. Dirt flew in all directions as Duke's powerful paws worked at the ground. Marcus followed, confusion and concern warring in his mind. "What's gotten into you, boy? This isn't like you at all." That's when Marcus saw it. Something that made his blood turn to ice water in his veins. There, partially buried under the forest debris that Duke was frantically clearing away, was a small blue mitten. A child's mitten. Marcus's eyes immediately went to Emma, who was now being loaded onto a stretcher. She was wearing both of her mittens, pink ones that matched her jacket. Marcus dropped to his knees beside Duke, his hands joining the dog's paws in clearing away the leaves and dirt. His radio crackled to life again, but he ignored it. His fingers closed around the mitten, and as he pulled it free, he saw something else. Something that would haunt him for months to come. There were more items buried here. A child's shoe, size different from Emma's. A torn piece of fabric that looked like it came from a Seattle Seahawks jersey. And something else, something that Duke was now pulling at with his teeth. Marcus reached down and helped extract it, and when he saw what it was, he immediately called for the entire search team to converge on their location. "Sarah," Marcus's voice was steady but urgent over the radio. "We have a situation here. Duke's found evidence of another child. Repeat, there may be another child out here." The search coordinator's response was immediate and professional, but Marcus could hear the shock beneath it. "Another child? There are no other missing children reported in Oregon or Washington. Are you certain?" But Duke was already moving again, his nose to the ground, following a scent trail that led deeper into the forest, toward an area the search teams hadn't yet reached. The dog's entire demeanor had changed. This wasn't a standard search anymore. This was something else entirely. Duke pulled at his leash with an urgency Marcus had never felt before, leading them away from the creek and up a steep embankment covered in moss-covered rocks. 15 minutes later, Duke led them to something that would change everything. Hidden behind a natural curtain of hanging moss, completely invisible unless you knew exactly where to look, was the entrance to a small cave. And from inside that cave came a sound that made Marcus's heart stop. The sound of breathing. Slow, shallow, but unmistakably human breathing. What Marcus and Duke found inside that cave would not only shock the entire Portland Police Department, but would bring the FBI racing to Pine Ridge Forest within hours. Because the child in that cave, the boy wearing the weathered Seahawks jersey with a name written in faded marker across the back, wasn't supposed to exist. Marcus Williams crawled into the cave, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, and what he saw made him forget every protocol he'd learned in 13 years of police work. There, huddled against the rocky wall in the deepest part of the cave, was a boy. Maybe 5 years old, maybe 6, it was hard to tell through the dirt and exhaustion etched on his small face. He wore a weathered Seattle Seahawks jersey, number 12, with the name Tyler written across the back in faded black marker. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow and labored, and his skin had the grayish pallor that Marcus had seen too many times before in hypothermia victims. Duke pushed past Marcus, moving directly to the boy with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a 70-pound German shepherd. The dog lay down beside the child, pressing his warm body against the boy's side, and began licking his face with soft, deliberate strokes. That's when the boy's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused, before closing again. Marcus's radio exploded with voices as he called for immediate medical backup to the cave. Sarah Martinez was coordinating the response, but her voice carried a note of disbelief that matched what everyone was thinking. 2 children? In the same forest? One reported missing, one completely unknown? In her 20-year career coordinating search and rescue operations, she'd never encountered anything like this. Paramedic Jennifer Torres arrived at the cave entrance 12 minutes later, having sprinted through the forest with her medical kit. She had to work in the cramped space, but her hands were steady as she checked the boy's vitals. Severe dehydration, she reported. Malnutrition, hypothermia, but his pulse is steady. We need to get him out now. Marcus, can you carry him? As Marcus lifted the boy, who weighed frighteningly little for his apparent age, he noticed something that made his detective instinct scream. The child had old scars on his arms, healed but concerning. His fingernails were torn and dirty, as if he'd been digging or climbing for extended periods. But most disturbing were the boy's feet, visible through holes in his worn sneakers. They were covered in calluses and cuts at various stages of healing, suggesting he'd been walking or running through these woods for a very long time. The journey to Providence Portland Medical Center was a blur of sirens and medical jargon. Duke, breaking all department protocols, had refused to leave the boy's side. Marcus had made a command decision to allow it, loading Duke into the ambulance alongside the medical team. Something about this entire situation felt wrong, felt bigger than a simple missing child case, and Duke's behavior was telling him to pay attention. At the hospital, Dr. Robert Chun took over the boy's care, and his initial assessment sent chills through everyone present. This child shows signs of prolonged neglect, he told Detective Lisa Washington, who had arrived to take over the investigation. These aren't injuries from a few days in the woods. We're looking at months, possibly years of malnutrition. Old fractures that healed without medical attention. Scarring consistent with long-term abuse. The mystery deepened when they tried to identify the boy. His fingerprints weren't in any database. His face didn't match any missing child reports from the past 5 years, not in Oregon, Washington, California, or anywhere in the national database. It was as if this child had simply appeared from nowhere, a ghost child living in the Pine Ridge forest that no one knew existed. Emma Sullivan, now recovering in a room 3 floors up, kept repeating the same phrase to her parents and the child psychologist. "The nice boy helped me," she said over and over. "He gave me his food. He kept me warm. He sang songs when I was scared." According to Emma's fragmented account, the boy had found her as darkness fell, had brought her to the shelter he'd built, and had stayed with her through the entire freezing night, protecting her from what she called the scary sounds in the dark. But it was what happened at 3:17 a.m. that night that defied all explanation. Marcus had finally given in to exhaustion and protocol, leaving Duke in the police K-9 vehicle in the hospital's secured parking area while he went inside to check on the boy and coordinate with Detective Washington. The vehicle was locked, the windows cracked just enough for air circulation, standard procedure for K-9 units. Marcus had personally double-checked the locks before walking away. Yet when security guard Trevor Hayes was doing his routine patrol of the 3rd floor at 3:17 a.m., he discovered something that made him immediately call for backup. Duke was lying on the floor beside the unknown boy's bed, his head resting on the mattress near the child's hand. The dog was awake, alert, watching the boy with an intensity that Trevor later described as almost human in its concern. The security footage told an impossible story. At 2:58 a.m., Duke had somehow opened the locked police vehicle from the inside, something that should have been physically impossible. He'd then enter the hospital through an automatic door at exactly the moment an emergency patient was being wheeled in. The dog had taken the stairs, not the elevator, climbing 3 flights. He'd walked directly to the boy's room, passing 37 other rooms without hesitation, and had pushed open the door that had been left slightly ajar by a nurse minutes earlier. How did Duke know which room? How did he know which floor? He'd never been inside this hospital before. Marcus watched the footage 6 times, looking for some explanation, but found none. Dr. Chun suggested perhaps the dog had followed a scent trail, but that seemed impossible given that the boy had been brought in on a gurney, taken up in an elevator Duke hadn't used, and Duke had been locked in a vehicle 50 yards away. K-9 behavioral specialist James Patterson was called in from Seattle the next morning to analyze Duke's behavior. After reviewing all the footage and examining Duke's actions, Patterson's conclusion was stunning. "This dog isn't just tracking scent," he told the assembled team. "He's showing signs of what we call emotional recognition. Duke has formed some kind of connection with this boy that goes beyond normal K-9 training or behavior. In my 30 years of working with police dogs, I've never seen anything like it." 3 days passed before the boy spoke his first words. Dr. Amanda Foster, the child psychologist, had been working with him carefully, building trust, using art therapy and play to help him feel safe. She was sitting beside his bed, Duke on the floor between them, when the boy suddenly gripped her hand and whispered 5 words that changed the entire investigation. "Is the bad man gone?" Dr. Foster kept her voice calm and steady despite her racing heart. "You're safe now. There's no bad man here. Can you tell me your name?" The boy looked at Duke, as if seeking permission or protection, then whispered Tyler. "The bad man called me Tyler." Over the next 2 hours, in fragments and whispers, Tyler's story emerged. He'd been living in the woods for many sleeps, he didn't know how many. He'd run away from someone he called Uncle Brad, who wasn't really his uncle but made him call him that. Uncle Brad had been mean, had hit him, had kept him locked in a basement for long periods. But then Uncle Brad had disappeared, stopped coming to the cabin where he kept Tyler. Tyler had waited for days, maybe weeks, before hunger drove him to break a window and escape. Since then, Tyler had been surviving in the forest, building shelters, stealing food from campgrounds and garbage cans. He'd learned which berries were safe to eat, how to find water, how to hide when people came near. He'd seen searchers before, had watched them from hiding places, but Uncle Brad had told him over and over that if the police found him, they would hurt him, would put him in jail, would do terrible things. So Tyler had remained hidden, a ghost child surviving alone in the wilderness. Detective Washington ran the name Brad through every database she could access, but Brad was too common, and without a last name or more details, it was like looking for a specific drop of water in the ocean. Tyler couldn't or wouldn't provide more details about Uncle Brad, becoming agitated and fearful whenever pressed for information. But it was Patterson's next discovery that brought the FBI into the case. While analyzing Duke's behavioral patterns, he cross-referenced them with the K-9 unit's previous cases. What he found sent shockwaves through the investigation. Duke's scent indicators, the specific way he'd alerted on Tyler, matched patterns from 3 unsolved cases from 2 years earlier. 3 different residential break-ins in the Portland metro area where only food and children's clothing had been stolen. Cases that had gone cold because there was no DNA evidence, no fingerprints, no leads. In each case, Duke had exhibited unusual behavior at the scene, showing what handlers had noted as excessive interest in certain scent trails that led nowhere. At the time, it had been dismissed as the dog having an off day. But now, Patterson realized Duke had been detecting the same scent signature, the same person. Tyler. Detective Washington pulled the files on those cold cases, and what she found made her immediately call the FBI. Because in one of those break-ins, the homeowner had installed a hidden camera that had captured a partial image of the intruder. The image was blurry, but it showed a small figure, child-sized, climbing through a doggy door. A child stealing food. A child who had been living somewhere in the Portland area 2 years ago and was now found in Pine Ridge Forest. The FBI arrived within hours, setting up a command center at the Portland Police Bureau. Special Agent Patricia Chun, no relation to Dr. Chun, took over the investigation. Her first action was to order a comprehensive DNA test on Tyler, expedited through the FBI laboratory. What that test would reveal would shatter a family's 3-year nightmare and expose a tragedy that had been hiding in plain sight. Because Tyler Benjamin Morrison hadn't just been living in the woods. He'd been stolen from his parents, Rebecca and John Morrison of Tacoma, Washington, 3 years ago when he was only 2 years old. The Morrison family had never stopped searching, never stopped hoping, never stopped believing their son was alive somewhere. But the DNA results would reveal something else, something that would explain Duke's incredible behavior and send the investigation in a direction no one could have predicted. The FBI laboratory in Quantico, Virginia, processed Tyler's DNA in record time, just 17 hours, and when Special Agent Patricia Chun received the encrypted results on her secure laptop at 4:23 a.m. Pacific Time, she had to read them 3 times before calling her supervisor. The match was 99.99% conclusive. The boy Duke had found in Pine Ridge Forest was Tyler Benjamin Morrison, abducted from a Safeway grocery store parking lot in Tacoma, Washington, on March 15, 3 years ago, when he was 26 months old. Rebecca Morrison had turned her back for less than 30 seconds to load groceries into her car. When she turned around, Tyler's car seat was empty, the buckles still warm from his body. The security footage showed a man in a baseball cap and sunglasses walking quickly away with something bundled in his jacket, but the image was too grainy for facial recognition. Within hours, Tyler's disappearance had triggered an Amber Alert across 3 states. Within days, it had become national news. Within months, when no ransom demand came and no body was found, it had become one of those cold cases that haunted everyone involved. Detective Lisa Washington sat in her Portland office, staring at the Morrison family file on her computer screen. Rebecca Morrison, 34, elementary school teacher. John Morrison, 36, architect. They'd spent their entire savings on private investigators. John had quit his job to search full-time, driving to every reported sighting, following every lead no matter how unlikely. Rebecca had been in therapy for 2 years, prescribed antidepressants after multiple suicide attempts. Their marriage had somehow survived, held together by the shared refusal to give up hope that Tyler was alive somewhere. And he had been. For 3 years, he'd been less than 150 miles away. Agent Chun coordinated with the Tacoma Police Department and the Morrison family's victim advocate before making the call that would change everything. It was 6:45 a.m. when Rebecca Morrison's phone rang. She answered on the first ring, as she had every unknown call for 3 years, always hoping, always terrified. When Agent Chun spoke the words, "We found Tyler. He's alive," Rebecca collapsed. John caught her before she hit the floor, and then he was crying too, 3 years of suppressed grief and desperate hope pouring out in a single moment. But Agent Chun had to temper their joy with harsh reality. Tyler had been through severe trauma. He didn't remember them. He'd been told they were dead, that they didn't want him, that they'd sold him to Uncle Brad. The psychological damage was extensive. The reunion would have to be carefully managed by child trauma specialists. It could take months, maybe years, before Tyler might accept them as his parents again. Meanwhile, in Portland, something extraordinary was happening in Tyler's hospital room. K-9 specialist James Patterson had been observing Duke's behavior for 72 straight hours, and what he documented would later revolutionize police dog training protocols nationwide. Duke wasn't just guarding Tyler, he was actively comforting him in ways that defied traditional understanding of canine behavior. When Tyler had nightmares, which happened every few hours, Duke would place his paw on the boy's chest and apply gentle pressure, a technique similar to what therapy dogs are trained to do for anxiety attacks, except Duke had never received that training. When medical staff needed to draw blood or perform procedures that frightened Tyler, Duke would position himself so Tyler could bury his face in his fur, and the dog would remain perfectly still, sometimes for 20 or 30 minutes, far beyond normal canine patients' thresholds. Dr. Amanda Foster, the child psychologist, noticed something else remarkable. Tyler would whisper to Duke when he thought no one was listening, telling the dog things he wouldn't tell the human caregivers. Through carefully placed recording devices, approved by the FBI for investigative purposes, they captured Tyler's whispered confessions to Duke. "I knew you'd come," Tyler whispered one night. "I saw you in the forest before, looking for people. Uncle Brad said dogs were bad, said they'd bite me, but I watched you. You found that old man last summer. You found the lady who fell by the creek. You always find people who are lost. So when I found the little girl, I thought maybe if I helped her, you'd find us both." The revelation was stunning. Tyler had been watching Duke work for months, maybe longer, studying the police search patterns from his hiding places in the forest. He'd learned Duke's schedule, knew when the K-9 unit trained in Pine Ridge Forest every second Tuesday. He'd been too terrified to approach, too well trained in fear by his captor, but he'd formed a connection with Duke from a distance, seeing the dog as a potential savior if he could just find the courage to be found. The investigation into Uncle Brad intensified. Tyler had gradually provided more details, mentioning a cabin with a green door, a truck with a broken taillight, a tattoo of a snake on Uncle Brad's left arm. FBI agents combed through thousands of missing person reports, arrest records, and death certificates. The breakthrough came when Tyler mentioned that Uncle Brad had coughed a lot, had complained about his chest, had sometimes coughed up blood. That detail led them to Bradley Coleman, 53, died 6 months earlier in a single-vehicle accident on Interstate 84 near Hood River. He'd been driving a stolen pickup truck and had no identification on him when he died. The coroner had noted advanced lung cancer in the autopsy. Coleman had an extensive criminal record including child endangerment, assault, and kidnapping charges from 15 years earlier in Idaho. He'd served 8 years in prison and had been off the radar since his release. The FBI team found Coleman's cabin 17 miles from where Tyler had been discovered, hidden deep in the national forest, accessible only by a barely visible dirt road. What they found inside made even hardened agents struggle to maintain composure. A basement with locks on the outside of the door. Children's clothes in various sizes. Notebooks filled with Coleman's paranoid writings about the government, about society, about his right to take what he wanted. And photographs. Dozens of photographs of Tyler at different ages, documenting 3 years of captivity. But there were other photographs too. Pictures of children Agent Chun didn't recognize. Pictures that appeared to be taken at different locations, different times. Some of the photos looked older, much older. The FBI's Crimes Against Children unit immediately took over that aspect of the investigation, running facial recognition on every image, checking them against missing children databases going back 20 years. Tyler's recovery proceeded slowly. The Morrisons had driven down from Tacoma and were staying in a hotel near the hospital, waiting for the psychologists to determine when Tyler would be ready to meet them. They spent hours watching him through a one-way glass window, Rebecca pressing her hand against the glass, whispering his name. John had to leave the room frequently, overwhelmed by seeing his son so changed, so damaged, yet so miraculously alive. The reunion was scheduled for a Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after Duke had found Tyler. Dr. Foster had been preparing Tyler gradually, showing him old photographs, talking about his real parents, trying to unlock memories from when he was 2. Tyler remained resistant, fearful, insisting his parents were dead, that Uncle Brad had told him so. But Duke knew something the humans didn't. Officer Marcus Williams noticed it first. Whenever the Morrisons were in the observation room, even though Tyler couldn't see or hear them, Duke would become alert, would position himself between Tyler and the door, would whine softly. Patterson studied this behavior and came to an incredible conclusion. Duke was detecting the Morrisons' scent through the ventilation system, and more remarkably, he was recognizing the genetic similarity between their scent and Tyler's. Dogs can detect familial relationships through scent, Patterson explained to the astonished team. It's been documented in some studies, but never to this degree. Duke knows these are Tyler's biological parents. He's been trying to tell us all along. The morning of the reunion, Dr. Foster made an unprecedented decision. Duke would be in the room when Tyler met his parents. If the dog trusted them, perhaps Tyler could learn to trust them too. It was unorthodox, possibly risky, but everyone agreed that Duke's presence was the only thing that made Tyler feel truly safe. What happened when that door opened would be captured on hospital security cameras and later released with the family's permission, becoming one of the most viewed reunion videos in internet history. But there was something else in that footage, something that sharp-eyed viewers would notice and point out in the comments, something that would lead to one more shocking discovery about Tyler's time in the forest. Because Tyler wasn't the only child Bradley Coleman had taken. And the evidence of that would come from the most unexpected source imaginable, a detail so small it had been overlooked until Duke, once again, showed them what they'd missed. The conference room at Portland Police Headquarters had been transformed into something softer, warmer, with children's drawings on the walls and toys scattered on a colorful rug, but nothing could ease the tension as Thursday morning arrived. Rebecca Morrison stood frozen in the hallway, gripping her husband John's hand so tightly her knuckles were white. 3 years, 2 months, and 5 days had passed since she'd last held her son. Now only a door separated them, and she was terrified. Dr. Amanda Foster spoke softly into her earpiece, coordinating with the team monitoring from the observation room. Tyler was inside with Duke, building with blocks, seemingly calm but unaware of what was about to happen. The psychologist had decided not to warn him in advance, fearing it would trigger his flight response. Duke lay beside the boy, but his ears were perked, his body slightly tense. He knew something significant was happening. At 9:17 a.m., Dr. Foster opened the door. Rebecca and John entered slowly, as instructed, keeping their movements calm and non-threatening. Tyler looked up from his blocks, and for a moment that seemed to stretch forever, he simply stared at these strangers. Then his eyes went to Duke, seeking guidance from the only being he trusted completely. What happened next stunned everyone watching. Duke stood up, walked directly to Rebecca Morrison, and gently took her hand in his mouth, not biting, just holding, the same way he'd grabbed paramedic Jennifer Torres's sleeve days earlier. Then, still holding Rebecca's hand, Duke led her toward Tyler. The boy watched, confused but not frightened, as Duke brought this strange woman closer. When Duke released Rebecca's hand and returned to Tyler's side, positioning himself in a way that said these people are safe, Tyler whispered something that made Rebecca's knees buckle. "You smell like my dream." Through tears, Rebecca managed to keep her voice steady. "What dream, sweetheart?" "The dream where someone sings the rainbow song." Tyler's voice was so quiet they could barely hear him. But Uncle Brad said dreams lie. Rebecca's breath caught. She'd sung Rainbow Connection to Tyler every night when he was a baby. It had been their special song, something she'd hummed to him even in the grocery store that horrible day. With trembling voice, she began to sing it now, soft and low, the same melody she'd sung 1,000 times to an empty bedroom. Tyler's eyes widened. His small hand reached out, not to Rebecca, but to Duke, gripping the dog's fur. Then, in a voice broken by tears and memory, 5-year-old Tyler began to sing along, remembering words from when he was 2, words that had survived 3 years of captivity buried deep in his mind. The reunion video, when released months later with the family's permission, would be viewed over 50 million times. But what most viewers didn't notice, what only a few sharp-eyed commenters pointed out, was something in the background. On Tyler's drawing table, partially visible, was a piece of paper with crayon drawings. Drawings of 2 children in the forest, not one. It was FBI agent Patricia Chun who first enhanced the image from the security footage. The drawing clearly showed 2 figures, one labeled me and another labeled Lily. When questioned gently about the drawing, Tyler's response sent the investigation in a completely new direction. Lily was Uncle Brad's other kid, Tyler said matter-of-factly, as if this wasn't earth-shattering information. She lived in the basement too, but then she got sick. Uncle Brad took her away. He said she went to live with the angels. The FBI immediately re-examined Bradley Coleman's cabin with cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar. What they found behind the cabin, in a shallow grave marked only by a pile of stones, confirmed their worst fears. The remains of a young girl, approximately 7 years old, who had died roughly 18 months ago. DNA testing would later identify her as Lily Chun, kidnapped from a park in Salem, Oregon, 4 years earlier. But Tyler's next revelation changed everything the investigators thought they knew. Lily wasn't the only one. Over the next several days, in careful sessions with Dr. Foster and always with Duke present, Tyler revealed that he'd seen other children at the cabin, though not at the same time. Uncle Brad would bring them, keep them for a while, then they would disappear. Tyler remembered at least 3 others besides Lily. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit delivered a profile that chilled everyone involved. Bradley Coleman hadn't been a simple kidnapper. He'd been what they called a collector, someone who took children not for ransom or even for clear abuse purposes, but because he wanted to own them, to control them completely. Tyler had survived because he'd been young enough to adapt, to learn Coleman's rules, to become invisible when needed. Marcus Williams was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, Duke at his feet, when his phone rang. It was James Patterson, the K-9 specialist, and his voice was urgent. "Marcus, I need you to bring Duke back to the forest. To the exact spot where you found Tyler. There's something we missed." 3 hours later, Marcus stood in Pine Ridge Forest, watching Duke work. The dog was exhibiting the same intense behavior he'd shown when finding Tyler, but this time he was focused on a different area, about 50 yards from the cave. Duke began digging at the base of a large cedar tree, whining with that same desperate urgency. What they uncovered wasn't human remains, thankfully. It was a plastic container, wrapped in garbage bags, buried about 2 feet down. Inside were items that made Marcus's hands shake as he carefully cataloged them with gloved hands. Children's belongings. A tiny bracelet with the name Amy engraved on it. A boy's watch, superhero-themed. A girl's hair ribbon. A photograph of Coleman with 4 different children at different times. And a notebook. The notebook was Coleman's record, written in cramped handwriting, documenting his crimes. Names, dates, locations. Some children he'd kept for years, others only weeks. Some he'd released when they got too old or too difficult. Others, like Lily, had died from illness or injury. The final entry, dated just days before his death, mentioned Tyler. Boy getting too smart. Too old. Time to find replacement. Tyler had escaped death by mere weeks. Coleman's car accident, the one that killed him, had happened while he was presumably hunting for Tyler's replacement. The FBI cross-referenced Coleman's records with missing children cases across 5 states. 12 names matched immediately. 7 of those children had never been found. 3 had been found dead, ruled as different cases with different suspects. 2, incredibly, might still be alive. Coleman had written about releasing 2 children when they aged out of his preference range. A boy named Marcus, freed 3 years ago near Seattle. A girl named Jennifer, released 2 years ago near Spokane. Both would be teenagers now, if they survived. The FBI launched an immediate multi-state search for these potential survivors. But it was Duke's continued behavior that suggested the most shocking possibility. Even after finding the buried container, Duke wouldn't leave the area. He kept returning to a specific spot near the cave, sitting and staring into the deeper forest, whining softly. Patterson studied the behavior for hours before reaching a startling conclusion. "This isn't past tense behavior," he told Agent Chun. "Duke is indicating active, recent human presence. Someone else has been here. Recently. Maybe even while Tyler was here." The investigation team set up motion-activated cameras throughout the area. What those cameras would capture 3 nights later would prove that Tyler and Emma weren't the only children Duke had saved that day in Pine Ridge Forest. Because someone else was living in those woods, someone who'd been watching the entire rescue, someone who'd been too afraid to come forward even when salvation was just yards away. Tyler, when shown a still image from the camera footage, immediately recognized the figure. "That's Spider," he said simply. "He lived in the woods too. Uncle Brad said he ran away, but sometimes I saw him watching the cabin. He taught me which berries were safe." The search for Spider, whoever he really was, became the FBI's top priority. Because if Tyler was right, there was another child survivor of Bradley Coleman's horror still living wild in Pine Ridge Forest. And winter was coming fast. The motion-activated cameras captured him at 2:43 a.m. on a moonless Tuesday night, a shadow moving between the trees with the practiced silence of someone who'd made the forest their home. The figure was small, thin, wearing layers of mismatched clothing that had seen too many seasons. When he paused at the cave entrance where Tyler had been found, the infrared camera caught his face clearly for just 3 seconds. A boy, maybe 13 years old, with hollow cheeks and eyes that held too much knowledge for someone so young. Tyler sat in the FBI's mobile command unit, Duke pressed against his leg, looking at the frozen image on the screen. His voice was certain when he spoke. "That's Spider. His real name is Marcus, like the officer. Uncle Brad got really mad when Spider ran away. Said he was ungrateful. Said the forest would kill him. But Spider was smart. He knew how to survive." The revelation matched Coleman's notebook perfectly. Marcus Thompson, taken from a bus stop in Bend, Oregon, 6 years ago when he was 7. Coleman had written "released too old" with a date from 3 years back, but now they understood the truth. Marcus hadn't been released. He'd escaped. And instead of seeking help, traumatized and trained to fear authorities, he'd chosen to live wild in the forest rather than risk being returned to Coleman. Agent Patricia Chun coordinated the most delicate operation of her career. They couldn't just sweep through the forest looking for Marcus. He knew every tree, every hiding spot, every escape route. He'd survived 3 years on his own, through freezing winters and scorching summers. If they spooked him, he might run deeper into the wilderness or worse, harm himself rather than be captured. It was Dr. Amanda Foster who proposed the solution that would define the entire rescue. "We don't hunt him. We let Duke find him. But more importantly, we let Tyler call him home." The plan was unprecedented. 3 days after the camera sighting, Tyler walked into Pine Ridge Forest, Duke on one side, Marcus Williams on the other. FBI agents maintained a distant perimeter, but Tyler had insisted that too many people would scare Spider away. They fitted Tyler with a GPS tracker and a microphone, and despite every protocol screaming against it, they let a 5-year-old traumatized child lead the most important rescue of the investigation. Tyler moved with surprising confidence through the underbrush, occasionally pointing out things to Officer Williams. "That's where Spider showed me the good mushrooms. That's where he left me food when Uncle Brad forgot to feed me. That's his warning mark on that tree, means danger nearby." The boy had been living a double life even while captive, secretly aided by another child who'd escaped the same nightmare. They reached a clearing near a small waterfall, and Tyler sat down on a fallen log. Duke lay beside him, alert but calm. Then Tyler did something that broke every heart monitoring from the command unit. He pulled out a peanut butter sandwich, tore it in half, and placed one piece on a flat rock about 10 feet away. Then he began to sing, soft and clear, a song no one recognized. "Spider taught me this song," Tyler explained to Officer Williams. "He said it was our safe song. If I sang it, he'd know it was really me, not Uncle Brad trying to trick him." 47 minutes. Nothing happened. Tyler sat patiently, occasionally humming the song, sharing pieces of his sandwich with Duke. Officer Williams later admitted he'd been about to call off the operation when Duke's ears suddenly perked forward. The dog didn't bark, didn't move, just focused intensely on a cluster of ferns 30 feet away. "Spider?" Tyler called out softly. "It's me. The bad man is gone. He died. I saw the police papers. He can't hurt us anymore." The ferns rustled. Slowly, painfully slowly, a figure emerged. Marcus Thompson, 13 years old, looking more like a forest spirit than a teenage boy. His clothes were handmade from various materials, his hair long and matted, his feet wrapped in what looked like tire rubber fashioned into makeshift shoes. But his eyes, when they met Tyler's, held a spark of hope that hadn't been there in years. "He's really dead?" Spider's voice was raspy from disuse. "Really dead," Tyler confirmed. "And this is Duke. He's the good dog I told you about. He found me. He found Lily's place. He wants to help you too." What happened next became the most watched moment in the entire case footage. Duke, without any command, stood up and walked slowly toward Marcus. The boy tensed, ready to run, but Duke simply sat down just out of arm's reach and offered his paw, the same way he'd been trained to greet children during school visits. Marcus stared at the paw for a long moment, then reached out and shook it. The first human contact he'd accepted in 3 years. The rest happened quickly. Marcus agreed to come in, but only if Tyler stayed with him. The Morrisons, displaying incredible generosity, immediately offered to be temporary guardians for Marcus while authorities searched for his biological family. The Thompson family of Bend had never given up hope, had continued searching even when police had declared Marcus likely deceased. The reunion between Marcus and his parents, David and Sarah Thompson, took place a week later at the same Portland facility. This time, Duke was there from the beginning, once again serving as a bridge between traumatized children and the families who loved them. Marcus's reintegration would take months, but the breakthrough came when his younger sister Emma, now 9, ran straight past everyone and hugged Duke first, declaring, "You brought my brother back." 6 months later, at the American Humane Hero Dog Awards in Los Angeles, the full story became public. Tyler Morrison, now confident in healing, walked onto the stage wearing a small suit, clutching a special collar he designed with the help of his art therapist. Duke sat at attention on the stage, Officer Marcus Williams beside him, as Tyler approached the microphone that had to be lowered for his height. "Duke didn't just save me and Emma," Tyler said clearly, his voice carrying across the silent auditorium. "He saved Spider, I mean Marcus, too. And maybe others we don't know about." Duke knew things humans couldn't know. He knew I needed help even when I was too scared to ask for it. He knew my real parents even when I forgot them. He knew Marcus was still out there when everyone else would have given up. Tyler placed the collar around Duke's neck. The inscription read, "You didn't just find us, you saved us." But there was more engraved on the back, something Tyler had insisted on adding, "Thank you for seeing us when we were invisible." The aftermath changed everything. The Duke protocol became standard training for canine units nationwide, emphasizing trust in a dog's instincts even when they contradicted human logic. Bradley Coleman's cabin became part of a federal investigation that uncovered a network of child trafficking that led to 17 arrests across 3 states. 5 more children were rescued from similar situations, all found using techniques developed from Duke's behavior during the Pine Ridge Forest case. The Morrison family moved to Portland to be closer to Tyler's treatment team. Remarkably, they maintained close contact with the Thompson family, and Tyler and Marcus, bonded by their shared trauma, became like brothers. Emma Sullivan's family started a foundation for missing children, with Duke as their official mascot. The little girl who'd been lost for 14 hours had become the key to saving multiple lives. Officer Marcus Williams and Duke continued their work with Portland PD, but now with a new mission. They visited schools, teaching children about safety but also about hope. Duke had a special vest made for these visits, covered in patches from every family he'd helped reunite. Tyler and Marcus often joined these visits, living proof that survival was possible, that good dogs and good people could overcome the darkest evil. Dr. Foster published a groundbreaking paper on trauma recovery in kidnapped children, featuring Duke prominently in what she called interspecies therapeutic intervention. The FBI created a new unit dedicated to long-term missing children cases, using Duke's case as their template for understanding how children could survive seemingly impossible situations. But perhaps the most powerful moment came during a 60 Minutes interview 1 year later. Leslie Stahl asked Tyler what he wanted people to know about his story. The 6-year-old thought carefully, then said, "Sometimes the scariest things hide the best things. I was scared of Duke at first because Uncle Brad told me to be. But Duke was really my guardian angel with 4 legs and a tail." The camera panned to Duke, lying at Tyler's feet, and in that moment, his tail wagged just once, as if he understood every word. The interview ended with footage from the forest, Tyler and Marcus playing while Duke watched over them, no longer lost children but survivors who'd found their way home. Rebecca Morrison would later say in her memoir, "We spent 3 years looking for Tyler in every face we passed, every news report, every nightmare. We never imagined he'd be found by a dog who understood something we couldn't, that sometimes lost children are hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone or something to tell them it's safe to be found." The Pine Ridge Forest case changed how America thinks about missing children, about police dogs, and about the incredible bonds that can form between humans and animals in the darkest of circumstances. But for 2 families in the Pacific Northwest, for a girl named Emma who was lost for just 1 night, and for a boy named Marcus who survived 3 years in the wild, Duke wasn't just a hero. He was proof that love and loyalty transcend species, that instinct can succeed where logic fails, and that sometimes, just sometimes, every lost soul can find their way home. If this story touched your heart, you're not alone. Millions have been moved to tears by Duke's incredible instincts and the courage of children who survived the impossible. Please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to join our community of people who believe in hope, heroism, and the incredible bond between humans and animals. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that miracles still happen. And tell me in the comments, what part of Duke's story affected you the most? Was it when he refused to leave Tyler's side? When he led Rebecca to her son? Or when he found Marcus after 3 years in the wild? Your comments help me know what stories matter most to you. Remember, every view, every share, every subscription helps us bring more of these powerful true stories to light. Because in a world that often feels dark, stories like Duke's remind us that heroes walk among us, sometimes on 4 legs. Thank you for watching, and never forget, guardian angels come in all forms, and sometimes they bark.